Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CALeVIP 2 public workshop. We will give everyone just a couple of minutes to join. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CALeVIP 2.0 public workshop. We'll give everyone just one more minute to join before we begin. All right, once again, welcome everyone to the CALeVIP 2.0 public workshop. We'll go ahead and get started. Next slide, please. My name is Amy Slavensky, and I will be moderating today. Our speakers this morning are Fidel Leon Green from the Center for Sustainable Energy, Brian Faubel from California Energy Commission, and Jeffrey Cook from CALSTART. For our Q&A session, our speakers will be joined by Jeffrey Liu from the California Energy Commission to answer your questions. Next slide, please. Before we get started, please note that you may submit questions for our panelists at any time during this presentation in the chat box, and we will answer them during our Q&A session. We will have several polls throughout this presentation and would greatly appreciate your participation. If you have any additional feedback, feel free to include it in the chat box or post a comment to the CEC docket. Also, because we are experiencing high traffic, there is a possibility that some technical difficulties may arise. We apologize for any delays or compromised presentation quality. If you miss any part of this webinar or if you have additional questions, please reach out to us at calevip@energycenter.org. The presentation will also be sent out to attendees and is available on the CEC docket. Next slide, please. On the agenda for today, Brian will give us an overview of the block grant and some new equipment requirements. Then we'll pass it over to Jeff from CALSTART to talk a little bit about communities in charge. Fidel will then get into some details on CALeVIP 2.0 goals, what we learned from CALeVIP 1.0 and what we're looking to change. And then he will discuss the application process and project concepts for CALeVIP 2.0. We'll wrap up with our question and answer session. I'll now pass it over to Brian to kick off the presentation. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Amy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Brian Faubel, again with the California Energy Commission. I was the project manager at the CEC for CALeVIP 1.0. And to really define that real quick is 1.0 was CALeVIP's projects to date, projects 1 through 13. And 2.0 will now be moving forward as it's a whole separate grant agreement. And I will be the lead now also for 2.0 and 1.0. I actually passed off project management to Sharon Purewell. But today, I want to get you some background on our 2 new block grants, again, communities in charge and CALeVIP 2.0. These new block grants are just 2 funding mechanisms that are part of a broader strategy to address infrastructure needs for light, medium, and heavy duty ZEVs. More on this strategy can be found in the draft Zero Emission Infrastructure Plan, or ZIP as we're calling it, which was published on April 1st. In designing the solicitation for the second block grants, we held multiple public workshops asking for input on the structure. We received multiple comments that we should make sure these two block grants are designed to complement each other rather than to compete. We determined that separating the block grants by technology type will provide a clear distinction between the two and let each concentrate on a specific purpose. As this slide shows, CALeVIP 2.0 will deploy fast chargers, while Communities in Charge will deploy level 2 chargers. Both block grants will be designed initially to fund ready-to-go applications, and each block grant will define what ready-to-go is for their projects. Technical assistance may also be available to help potential applicants to meet the ready-to-go definitions. Next slide, please. So now I want to get into some of the equipment requirements as we can make sure the manufacturers have enough lead time before we launch our projects. This slide highlights the current CALeVIP 1.0 equipment requirements. We define the power levels, connectors, that the EVSE must be networked, must use an open standard protocol, be safety certified, and then the level 2 chargers must also be ENERGY STAR certified. Next slide, please. The new block grants will build off of the CALeVIP 1.0 requirements, but there will be 3 new requirements for DC fast chargers and 2 for level 2 chargers. The first is that both level 2 and DC fast chargers must be ISO 15118 hardware ready. The Energy Commission held a workshop in November 2021 to go over the 15118 recommendation, and this slide highlights what hardware ready means. This requirement is also a self-attestation from the EV charger manufacturer, and their product specification sheets should reflect that. The link at the bottom provides additional information on the Energy Commission's recommendation. This will be a requirement again for our 2 new block grants. This is not a blanket requirement though for all Energy Commission solicitations, as the CEC establishes requirements for each separate solicitation. Next slide, please. The 2 new requirements, the next 2 requirements are OCPP 1.6 or later and DCFC ENERGY STAR certification. Both these requirements were workshopped by the Energy Commission on November 18th, 2019, quite a while back, where we proposed third-party certification for both. The Energy Commission supports interoperability and open access. We want to make sure that we are funding chargers that provides options to the site hosts and assures that the chargers can still be utilized in the unfortunate event that a network goes out of business. We want to make sure that we're not funding stranded assets. To support this, we are requiring both level 2 and DC fast chargers be OCPP 1.6 or later certified through the Open Charge Alliance program, Open Charge Alliance's program for certification. Both the full certificate and the security certificate will be required. We propose to still allow proprietary network service contracts if it allows the owner of the charger to switch to another OCPP compliant network provider at the end of their contract if they so desire. The final new requirement is the ENERGY STAR certification for DC fast chargers. The ENERGY STAR specifications and test method for DC fast chargers were finalized in March 2021. ENERGY STAR is already required for level 2 chargers, and we now will move forward with this requirement for DC fast chargers. Next slide, please. This slide shows our proposed implementation dates for each requirement. Both block grants will launch their first project later this year and will require OCPP 1.6 or greater certification, and 15118 will be required for at the launch for DC fast chargers. We are setting a later date for the level 2 ISO 15118 requirement. Today, there are multiple chargers that meet this new requirement, but they are not ENERGY STAR certified. We are also proposing a later date for the DC fast charger ENERGY STAR requirement. We want to make sure there's enough lead time for the manufacturers to make the necessary hardware adjustments and then also be able to go through the ENERGY STAR certification process. The September 1st date shown here is not when the first projects will launch, but were selected because we would like to have the eligible equipment lists for each project posted prior to the project launches. To be listed on each block grant's eligible equipment list, the manufacturers must meet all the current requirements. Manufacturers may also become eligible at any time, even after the requirement dates, but applicants to the projects will only be able to select chargers currently listed on the eligible equipment list at the time of submitting their application. The links below offer more information about the certification processes. I also want to quickly mention that the CEC is funding a grant to establish a vehicle grid innovation lab that will open in California later this year and will be capable of testing both ISO 15118 and OCPP. With that, I'll pass it back to Amy. Thank you.
Thank you for the overview, Brian. I will now hand it over to Jeff at CALSTART to give us some information on communities in charge.
Thank you so much, Amy. My name's Jeff Cook. I am the Deputy Director of Light Duty EV Charger Incentive Administration over at CALSTART. And today I'd like to share with you just a brief overview, a high-level understanding of communities in charge. Next slide. So Communities in Charge aims to create opportunities for development of light-duty level 2 charging infrastructure focused on the areas where communities live and gather. We intend to do this through financial incentives to accelerate the deployment of this infrastructure, prioritize those applicants through targeted outreach to what we are calling community connections, which we shall further define as time goes on, and help participants mature their project's development through technical assistance. Next slide. We realize that folks are going to approach their infrastructure development journey from a variety of levels of readiness, and we aim to provide assistance at each phase. While those projects which are ready to go shall be the only ones to receive financial incentives, the goal here is really to assist participants, whether you've just identified an opportunity for EV charging or maybe identified a charging site and require some further coordination. The ultimate aim here is if you are sitting at those other levels of readiness, either ready to plan or ready to partner, as you see on your screen, our aim is to help prepare you through technical assistance to participate and ultimately receive incentives for your infrastructure project as a ready-to-go Communities in Charge project. Next slide. So while this is a very high-level sort of teaser to Communities in Charge, we will be holding some more robust and detailed workshops later this month and early next month to solicit input for some key stakeholders. So our technical, funding, and community advisory committee meetings will begin to be held at the end of this month all the way through July. And as Brian alluded to before, the planned launch of Project One is by end of 2022, with the planned launch of a subsequent project in early next year. For any questions or anything that you'd like to find out a bit more about the Communities in Charge project, feel free to reach out to myself, Jeff Cook, at the email address you see on your screen, or our Associate Project Manager currently assisting us on project design and development, Dylan Kadish, whose email is available on the screen there for you as well. So thank you for letting me take just a couple moments of time here to give you a brief overview of Communities in Charge and what we're hoping to do. With that, I will hand it back over to Amy.
Thank you very much, Jeff. We'll now pass it over to Faubel to discuss CALeVIP 2.0. Faubel?
Thanks, Amy. So in CALeVIP, we have always started our webinars with a high-level overview of the project goals. And for CALeVIP 2.0, which for now is our working title, we are continuing that tradition with 3 revised project goals. These are to facilitate the rapid deployment of chargers, carry out fast and efficient application processing, and ensuring the deployment of chargers is distributed equitably and in areas of high need. So what does this mean? Rapid deployment means that we will focus on quick installations of chargers statewide, but it also points to our focus on fast charger installations. For fast and efficient processing, this means that improvements are not only made in our processes, but also in our platform, which will help facilitate faster processing and improve communication with applicants. And lastly, address gaps means that the installations should not just increase the availability of fast charging stations, but that they should increase access to charging stations by installing them in regions where few, if any, exist. So moving on, I want to talk about some lessons we have learned from CALeVIP 1.0. Our first lesson is that first come, first served has not worked as intended. Due to the high demand for these rebates, first come, first served has created a true race against the clock, which means we've received many incomplete applications submitted as placeholders, and many applications with significant errors, all because of the rush to beat the clock and receive funding. This has led to long processing times due to the high number of applications requiring follow-up, and has also led to a large waitlist for rebates. The second lesson is that having 13 regional projects, each with slightly different requirements, has created challenges for applicants in terms of understanding their requirements for each project and then providing the correct documentation. This has created an additional point of follow-up, creating more delays and inefficiencies for application processing and rebate payment. Our third lesson is that even after all our work to process applications and reserve funds, 40% of those applications end up canceling. This is an issue because this means that we must start all over for that set of funding and delay chargers in the ground. And this means applicants in the waitlist might be ready to begin for their project, but are delaying their installations to receive funding from CALeVIP. Lastly, 30% of all applications require extensions, which further delays chargers in the ground and requires additional work on our end to process extensions and relevant documentation. CALeVIP's purpose has always been to facilitate the rapid deployment of chargers, so these delays, extensions, and cancellations are all counter to our goal. So what are we changing in CALeVIP 2.0 to incorporate these lessons learned? First, we're getting rid of first come, first served. Instead, we have moved on to an application window where we will give you a span of time to fill in, revise, double check, and submit your applications. Then we will take those applications and sort them into tiers and randomly assign them a place in line, with higher tiers receiving priority. I'll discuss this in more detail shortly. Next, we want to prioritize and incentivize a more proactive approach with permitting agencies and utilities. So we will be requiring submission of either the permit application package or the utility service design application package with your application. We're also adding a construction progress checkpoint to improve communication along the installation process so that we can better understand and provide support for the installation process. And this will also help us better compile data on construction timelines and delays for use in advocating for changes where necessary. I'll also talk more about this later. Lastly, we are moving forward with a more statewide approach and limiting our projects to 2 main projects to help establish more consistency and predictability. We may also announce more targeted projects in the future to address more specific gaps for DCFC. Okay, so let's dive in and talk more about these changes, starting with the application window. As I previously mentioned, we're moving on from first come, first served and implementing application windows. What this means is that after the landing page is set up, we'll give you a period of time to review that material, and then we'll open up the application and give you an additional period of time to fill in, revise, double check, and submit your applications. We're proposing that the application window be a length of 30 days, but we will ask for your feedback on this, so please gather your thoughts on this topic. Once this window closes, we won't accept any more applications, and we will award the rebate funds to applicants. Applicants that do not receive an award will also be notified and will not move to a wait list. Instead, we encourage them to improve their project readiness and apply during the next application window, which we will announce ahead of time. Here is a brief visual for the application timeline. So that landing page will open. After some time, the application window will also open, and 30 days later, the application window will close and no more applications will be accepted. Soon after, application processing will begin and all applicants will be notified of either a funds reserved or funds not reserved status. Again, there won't be a wait list for applicants that do not receive funding. Instead, we encourage them to improve their project readiness and apply during the next application window. Here's what we mean by improving project readiness. So for CALeVIP 1.0, we required site identification as the minimum amount of work to have funds reserved. It was desired for applicants to come ready to go, meaning that there is some sort of plan in progress, or ready to build, meaning that permitting and design is complete. However, this was never incentivized or used in the selection of applications. In 2.0, we'll be requiring applicants to come ready to go and show us evidence that permitting or service design process has started. In addition, we want to incentivize and prioritize applicants that are coming to us ready to build. How this will work is the tiered randomization method for selecting the applications that will have funds reserved. There will be 3 tiers. Tier 3, ready to go, is the baseline to be eligible into the project and requires the site verification form and either the permit application package or utility service design application package to be submitted. These include the relevant application, the plan set that was submitted, and evidence of fee or advance payment where required. To be assigned into Tier 2, design approved, you must submit either an issued permit or your final utility design with your site verification form. Finally, to be assigned into Tier 3, ready to build, both the issued permit and the final utility design will need to be submitted with the site verification form. Once all applications have been assigned a tier, each application will be randomly assigned a place in line within each tier, and funds will be reserved for Tier 1 first, followed by Tier 2, and then Tier 3. So if in the first application window you apply and do not receive funds, and you were in the ready to go tier, you can continue preparing your site for the next application window, maybe get into the design approved tier, and receive higher priority in the next application window. So moving on to the last of our major changes, the construction progress checkpoints. Again, the reason we are implementing this is because in CALeVIP 1.0, we did not have any communication points between the 60-day checkpoint and the final document submission and often any issues or delays were not identified until applications were near expiration. These checkpoints are intended to provide a built-in time to communicate progress on construction and gather better information on construction timelines and delays. These will be in the form of brief surveys that are required to be submitted at various points after funds are reserved and will require one document for the validation of the construction progress. We will also be testing this process out soon for CALeVIP 1.0 projects to help gather similar information and help streamline the current extensions process. So stay tuned for more information on that. Now, I want to thank you all again for being here, and as promised, we're taking a break to gather your feedback on some of these elements that we just presented to you. So here is our first poll question. CALeVIP 2 will have higher eligibility requirements for project readiness. Do you support the proposed tiers for readiness? I'll give you some more time to answer and then closing the poll. Okay, poll is closed. I actually can't see the poll results on my side. Give me one sec.
I can share the results.
Thank
Looks
you.
like about 50% either agree or strongly agree, 20% are neutral, 11% disagree, and 8% strongly disagree.
Great, thank you. Our next poll question is, what length of application window would you prefer? Less than 7 days, 7 to 2 weeks, or 7 days to 2 weeks, 15 to 30 days, or more than 30 days? Please let us know your preference. Just a few more moments, and then we'll be closing the poll.
All right, so it looks like 3% would like less than 7 days, 12% 7 to 14 days, 43% 15 to 30 days, and 43% more than 30 days.
Great, thank you all for your feedback, and we'll keep that in mind as we're continuing to design and further refine our proposal here. So now let's move on to our proposal for project concepts and some requirements for those projects. First thing I'd like to discuss is the regions that we would like to select. So the goals of region selection is to distribute the funds equitably, meaning that we are pooling together communities that are similar and having those communities compete for funding and reducing the likelihood that large metropolitan areas would receive majority of funding, leaving less populated areas without any installations. We also want to distribute funds widely and faster, meaning that we want larger regions so that there is more immediate access to more of the state and don't need to get to 13 projects to cover a wide area of the state. So our first concept is to focus on the degree of urbanization. meaning that all rural, mostly rural counties would be grouped together, followed by those more populated but not quite urban areas, and then urban communities and counties would all be grouped together. This would be based on the USDA classification system and factor in SB 1000. And again, this is a concept, not the final map. We just want your thoughts on what our method should be for creating these regions. Region concept number 2 is by need for DCFC. So we could focus on areas that have the greatest need, meaning the least amount of DCFC installed per 100 miles of primary and secondary roads. This is using currently AFDC data for interstates, highways, and main arteries to define this, just to create the initial concept. And this creates slightly more of a checkerboard effect with less distinct grouping of a region, but it does have a little more targeted impact. So those are just some of the pros and cons of this approach. That it just might be a little more difficult to understand or pinpoint which projects would be going first or which counties would be going first. For the third region concept is continuing our geographic approach. In this example, we've done a northern, a southern, a central, and a greater Bay Area region, though these are, again, not the final regions we would select, just an example of what that might look like. And unfortunately, this type of dispersion or splitting up of the state would cause more of the less populated areas to be grouped with large metropolitan areas, increasing likelihood that large metropolitan areas might eat up and take up more of the demand. But it is a lot easier to understand and communicate when we are launching these projects. So now we want to hear from you. For projects 1 and 2, we are proposing 3 options for funding regions: the degree of urbanization, the need for DCFC, and the geographic regions. Note again, these are just the concepts for developing the regions, not the final regions, but we would like to know which option you prefer. Okay, just a few more moments and we will close the poll.
Okay, looks like pretty even split here. 27% like it, a degree of urbanization, 36% are for the need for DC fast chargers, and 37% are geographic regions.
Great, thank you all again for your feedback. We'll certainly keep it in mind as we're continuing to design this program. The next topic I would like to discuss is our focus areas for each project. Project 1, right now we are proposing to only fund disadvantaged communities and low-income communities. Project 2 would have the same requirements as Project 1, but we would remove the DAC disadvantaged community low-income community requirement. This does not mean that disadvantaged low-income community sites would not be eligible for P2, just that the requirement to be a disadvantaged community, low-income community would not be in effect for Project 2. And these would be our primary projects that we would continue funding and launching application windows for. And then as we see more specific needs, we would launch more targeted projects to address specific gaps with very specific requirements for what we would like in those projects. So Project 1, focusing on priority populations, is scheduled to launch in Q4 of this year. Again, this is disadvantaged community and low-income community only, and it's DC fast charger only, as all CALeVIP 2.0 projects will be. The regions to be funded are to be determined based on your feedback, and additional regions may be funded in subsequent application windows. So if not all regions are available in the first window, those would be available in the second or third window, hopefully covering the state in much less time. Project 2 would be scheduled to launch sometime next year and would be open to everyone, including disadvantaged communities and low-income communities. Again, it's DC fast charger only, and the same regions would be funded, but again, still to be determined, and additional regions would be funded in subsequent application windows. So about the interaction of these application windows, here's how the funding timelines would work for the application windows. So in Q4 2022, we would launch Project 1, Window 1 with up to $30 million of funding. In 2023, we would launch Project 2 and its window number 1. In subsequent quarters, we would launch Project 1 Window 2, and any leftover funds from Window 1 would be transferred over to Window 2, and applications would be funded with the total pot of money. And same thing for Project 2. Any leftover funds would be then transferred over to Window 2, Project 2, to be launched after Window 2 for Project 1. So now let's dive a little more deeply into the details. First, I want to discuss the active connector definition. So the way we've defined this is the number of DCFC connectors that can concurrently supply the rebated power level at any one time. And this is the power at the connector. So for example, if a DC fast charger is capable of providing 125 kilowatts of charging and has 4 connectors on say 2 pedestals, and is capable of powering the 2 pedestals at the same time, each one at 62.5 kilowatts. This means it has 2 active connectors, and it would be eligible for 2 DCFC rebates at the 50 to 100 rebate level. And this is using CALeVIP 1.0 rebate levels. We'll discuss CALeVIP 2.0 rebate levels in the next slide. So the first requirement to discuss is the minimum DC fast charger power outputs. Again, these will be per active connector. And we have 4 options here to consider. One is, for example, splitting it up between different regions. So say we do rural and urban, we could do rural 50 kW and urban 150 kW. Option 2 is set it at 50 kW for all regions. Option 3 is 100 kilowatts. And then option 4 is 150 kilowatts minimum to qualify for any funding. The next requirement is the rebate tiers for funding. And again, these are per active connector. Option 1 is having 3 rebate tiers with 2 cutoffs, one at 100 kilowatts and one at 200 kilowatts. Option 2 is again 3 tiers, but cutoffs at 150 and cutoffs at 250. Option 3 is 2 tiers with a cutoff at 100 kilowatts. And option 4 is 2 tiers with cutoffs at 150 kilowatts. And note that these are the rebate tiers, meaning that for each subsequent, for each tier, there would be a different rebate amount that would be awarded. So now we want to hear from you. What minimum power output do you prefer? Okay, just a few more moments and we'll be closing the poll.
Okay, it looks like 21% say 50 kilowatts rural, 150 for urban, 24% say 50 kilowatts for all, 25% 100 kilowatts for all, 30% 150 kilowatts for all.
Okay, great. It seems like we have mixed opinions about this, but we really appreciate your feedback. The next poll question is about the power output tiers for rebates. So which option that I discussed do you prefer? There's the 3 tiers with 100 and 200 cutoffs, 3 tiers with 150 and 250 cutoffs, 2 tiers with a cutoff at 100, and 2 tiers with a cutoff at 150. Please let us know what you prefer. Okay, just a few more moments.
All right, looks like 23% say 3 tiers with 100 and 200 cutoffs, 36% say 3 tiers with 150 and 250 cutoffs, 24% 2 tiers with 100 kilowatt cutoff, and 18% say 2 tiers with 150 kilowatt cutoff.
Great. Thank you again. It looks like the majority of you, or the largest percentage of you, prefer that 3 tiers with 150 and 250. So thank you again. Okay, the next one to discuss is the number of rebates per site. This would be 1 rebate per active connector. So an example of something where we would be considering is a minimum of 2 for rural regions, maximum of 6 for rural regions, and a minimum of 4 for urban regions and maximum of 6 for urban regions. We could also do 2 minimum for everyone or 4 minimum for everyone. This is something in discussion. We do not have a poll question for this one today, but we would love to hear your feedback on comments and questions in the chat or through the docket, which we will discuss later. Lastly, we do have connector requirements. This has been updated from our CALeVIP 1.0 requirements in Alameda County that at least 75% of the rebated connectors must be CCS. This was previously 50%. And a new change is also that Tesla connectors may be eligible. And another change is that CHAdeMO connectors will not be eligible for funding. This does not mean that they cannot be installed on site. It just means that funding will not be awarded based on the selection of CHAdeMO connectors. So now some documentation requirements. So during the application window, we would be requiring the site verification form and the permit application package or the utility service design application package. There will be a checkpoint within 4 months of funds reserved for your final permit if it has not already been submitted. And then additional checkpoints throughout the process for construction progress updates. At project completion, meaning within 12 months of fund reserved, we would require the signed application form, the design, equipment, and installation costs, installation data form with EVITP attestation, photos of installed equipment, the serial numbers of the equipment, and your final inspection card. And note this has been whittled down from the, I believe, 10 or 11 documents down to 6. So we are trying to streamline this process and make it as painless as possible for our applicants. Once project is completed, we would require charger usage data for 5 years. And this is traditionally done through your network provider. So poll question number 6 is, do you agree with our proposed documentation requirements? Okay, just a few more moments.
All right, it looks like 12% strongly agree, 39% agree, 39% neutral, 8% disagree, and 2% strongly disagree.
Great, thank you for letting us know your thoughts. So as we mentioned, some other enhancements that we will be carrying out is providing some increased applicant visibility, meaning an updated applicant dashboard and improved communications. We will also be refreshing our website and our resources, trying to make them more visible and more accessible, easier to use. As previously discussed, we're streamlining our documentation process, consolidating where we can, so that we are requiring less total documentation. And lastly, we are creating an interactive eligible equipment list so that it is a lot easier to compare between equipment know which rebate tier specific configurations are located, and just overall provide easier use for our applicants to figure out how much funding they would receive if they install X amount of chargers with X amount of connectors. And we do have this presentation available now on the docket and will be listed under today's events. So with that, I'll turn it back to Amy, who will moderate the Q&A session this morning. Amy?
Thank you, Fidel, and thank you to all of our speakers this morning. And next slide, please. So let's go ahead and get started with the Q&A. And we have a couple of discussion topics here that we would love to hear your feedback on. So feel free to post your thoughts in the chat or comment to the CEC docket. I will give everyone about 5 minutes here to gather your thoughts, put questions in the chat box, and feedback to these 2 questions. Thank you, everyone.
And while we're waiting, Amy, this is Brian with the commission, everyone. I kind of just wanted to throw out one additional piece of information that in trying to design the projects for CALeVIP 2.0, we're having a slight mind shift of setting these requirements and who we should be thinking about. In 1.0, we really we concentrated on making our requirements thinking of site hosts and what's best for the site hosts. In 2.0, we're shifting and saying what is the best requirements for the end users, the EV drivers. So a lot of these requirements might not be friendly for site hosts, but it's what's best for the public and the people. So if we can that's why we're kind of proposing those higher power levels, the more chargers per site to help with any downtimes or anything like that, or overcrowding. And so just keep that in mind, that we're trying to think long-term end user experience and not so much of favoring the site hosts.
I will give everyone 2 more minutes to gather thoughts and ask questions. All right, let's go ahead and get started asking some questions here. So the first question I have is for Fidel. What's the difference between a project and a window?
Yes, thank you. So a project will be either the disadvantaged community, low-income community, priority populations project, or the project that is open to all. And it just divides the funding so that we are prioritizing those disadvantaged and low-income communities. The windows for each project are more of like funding rounds for which we will open a period of time for applications to come in and then close and distribute the funds or reserve the funds for those applications. And then for each project, there might be multiple windows as new funding is released. And we would notify everyone ahead of time so that there is ample time to prepare and find sites for these projects.
Thank you, Fidel. Next one is for Brian. How much money will be available under each block grant this round?
So currently we're asking both CALeVIP 2.0 and communities in charge to design their first projects for up to $30 million. And so that will just be that first application window or first project. Each agreement has been approved by the commission for up to $250 million over time. That does not mean we have that again today, but the authority to add funding later on if we so desire and have the ability to. So similar with CALeVIP 1.0, it launched with about 12 million and got up to 200 million over the years. So same with these 2 new block grants. First projects starting around 30 million with over time ability of maybe $250 million.
Thank you, Brian. Fidel, will the application window be per applicant or per location? For example, if I'm applying for 4 different site hosts, will I need a reservation for each site location?
Yes, that's correct. So the windows will be per funding allocation. So for example, that initial up to $30 million that Brian mentioned would be the first application window. And you would need to submit an application for each specific site that you would like to receive funding for.
Thank you. And a similar question, how often will these application windows be available?
Yes, so this is something that is still in development. Ideally, we would get to a point where we could launch them every few months, and obviously with enough advance notice so that we're not springing a project on you without you having a project ready to apply for. The intent is to give you time to go find the sites, give you time to apply, and be ready to move forward and complete the installation.
Thank you, Fidel. Brian, will there be any changes in the EVITP certification requirements for communities in charge or CALeVIP 2.0?
No, there will not be. That is pretty much state law. We don't have the ability to change any of that. And those requirements are just set for all state-funded programs through CPUC, ARB, and Energy Commission. So they will stay the same.
Thank you. And Brian, another question for you. Can you provide a full list of the DC fast charger software requirements? There is new protocol. What is the existing protocol?
So the software requirements, again, are pretty standard right now, or open, vague, we'd say, where in CALeVIP 1.0, you have to be able to utilize an open source protocol, meaning it doesn't have to have it now, but the charger can somehow revert and use it. The new protocol, again, is the OCPP 1.6 or later, which is fully defined, and the links provided in the deck take you to the certification process and information about what that includes.
Thank you, Brian. Fidel, we have a couple of questions about permits. Does the customer have to get the permit or the contractor, and who pays for it?
Typically, it is the contractor who goes out and gets the permit, though it's not a requirement, and anyone could get the actual permit. So that would be something that would be arranged between the applicant, the site host, and the contractor, and any other third-party organizations involved.
Thank you. And on a similar thread here, how do you get permits without having engaged an installer? If you engage an installer, those funds are not reimbursable, correct?
Sorry, if you engage an installer, those funds are not reimbursable?
Correct. Are those costs able to be reimbursed or incentivized?
Oh, I see. Yes, so that's something that we are still developing specific timelines for, but the idea is that we would set up a specific date or criteria for costs that would be reimbursable. We would certainly include some of those costs, but permitting costs are usually not eligible funds or eligible costs. So the specific permitting costs would not be reimbursable for any of our projects, but maybe the design ones would likely be, and we just have to determine specific timelines and details for that, so that it is a workable model for everyone.
Yeah, and if I can expand on that a little bit, on what 1.0 offers right now is costs are eligible once the landing page for that project goes up. So in 2.0, if we went that same route, would be when the landing page is up or when we announce basically the landing page, even if there is a second round of funding later, we'd still allow the original landing page. Now, since we are having more tiers, we may shift that, and we welcome comments to be submitted to the docket on what is that appropriate timeline. Because I think the big thing we have to address is we don't want free riders, essentially, people that are going to install these chargers anyways. And I think this was one of our discussion questions. What should be the highest point someone can be further along at their installation? You know, waiting energization, we probably don't want to fund those because they're going to happen anyways. And so we are looking for something where construction may have already started, but at what point along construction should we say, all right, you can't be past this? While we would say again on when costs could begin to be eligible, that's what we're really looking for that input on. Should we say, you know, at the time of landing page launch, 2 months prior, 6 months, but let's not get carried away again, as we want to make sure we're funding or incentivizing people to install chargers that they may have not really been planning on.
Thank you both. Another question is, how far in advance of Windows would landing pages go up? And I can take this one. It will be anywhere from 30 to 60 days. We're hoping to have 60 days notice, but 30 days would be the minimum. And we will also have webinars in that time frame. And Fidel, when will Project One regions be selected and communicated to the public?
This will be soon. We're hoping to finalize these details in the probably next 1 to 2 months at the latest, and begin preparing the details for our implementation manuals and landing pages to communicate that. So there's no set date. But I would say it's coming soon, within the next few months, as we are working with the CEC to finalize this design. And we will have additional workshops. But correct me if I'm wrong, Amy.
That's correct. Thank you, Fidel. Brian, why are CHAdeMO connectors not eligible?
So this is addressed in the Energy Commission ZIP, the Zero Emission Infrastructure Plan that the Energy Commission put together, and how the industry is moving towards CCS connectors. And so again, in designing both block grants, we're thinking long-term, as these chargers are going to be out there for 10 years plus. And so as the market is moving that way, we want to account for that. And again, we will be requiring CCS and a percentage to be CCS. I believe it was 75% of the active connectors will be available for rebates, but CHAdeMO could still be installed or included. Again, if a charger has a CCS and a CHAdeMO, that is eligible, but we just will not be rebating active connectors that are CHAdeMO.
Yeah, and Brian, you cut off a little bit on my end at the end there. Do you mind repeating that last thought?
Sure. Yeah, I was just again saying that if a charger has both connectors, a CHAdeMO and a CCS on it, that will still be eligible to be installed. But again, the rebates or incentives will only be paid out to active connectors for CCS or Teslas, and CHAdeMO will not be eligible for an incentive.
Thank you. Brian, what are the funding max caps, if any, that can be awarded to a single company?
So right now we are not proposing a max cap on companies. Again, it's all we're defining right now is the max number of rebates per site. Again, will be that 6 for the fast chargers that we're talking about. And so whatever we come up with later on the dollar amounts and the rebate structure, one application, again, per site will be eligible for up to 6 incentives. We don't currently have anything planned for max rebate levels or amounts someone can have, actively or over time, but we welcome comments on anything that may help us address that. Again, what we want to make sure is what we've shared in 1.0 is we want to make sure contractors are managing what's in their capabilities and not, applying for 10,000 sites. That'd be great if we had 10,000 sites, but not biting off more than they can manage, because again, 2.0 is going to have a lot stricter cancellation and extension guidelines. And you can kind of see that on how we're designing everything, that we want these chargers to be installed quickly. So currently there is nothing proposed on limits. It's still under consideration, but we definitely welcome any docketed comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Fidel, are rebates only available for charging stations that will be available to the public?
Yes, that is the current thinking, but I will defer to Brian for additional information.
Correct. Yeah, we're again building off our 1.0 requirements here for 2.0, and DC fast chargers are required to be available 24/7 to the public. They can be behind, in parking garages that require payment, as long as all the public has the ability to access that if they so desire. But they cannot be restricted use to any individuals, companies, or fleets. Communities in charge will set up their own requirements for level 2.
Thank you. Fidel, will each project be prioritized by the same 3 tiers we discussed?
Yes, that is correct. For each project 1 and project 2, that would be the prioritization and selection methodology. It may be subject to change for additional projects that are more specific and targeted for specific gaps in DCFC. So more to come on that later once we get to that point.
Thank you, Fidel. Another question for you, Fidel. Given the increased level of readiness required, will there be technical assistance offered to help applicants prepare their applications?
Yes, the technical assistance will be more in the form of videos and guides to help walk you through the application process and any questions, and then any additional help needed to get through the application process can be handled by CSE staff.
Thank you. Another one for you, Fidel. What is the difference between the final permit and the first 2 stages of the documentation requirements? So I believe that's in what's due at application and what is due within that 4-month period.
So at application, the minimum documentation requirement is that a permit has been applied for, or that the utility service design has been applied for. For the checkpoint in the middle, that is the issued permit, and that can be the same as the document submitted earlier on if you're further along in the process. So if you're coming to us with a permit in hand, that would be considered in your application and would not be required to resubmit later on in the process.
Thank you. Brian, what are the requirements for the Tesla chargers since they may be eligible?
The Tesla chargers must meet all the requirements as every other charger. So it is may be eligible because today I don't believe are OCPP, but if they go ahead and become OCPP certified, then they would be eligible. But again, it's pretty much saying any charger, as long as it meets all these requirements, would be eligible.
Thank you. Fidel, what is the definition of a site?
Yes, so the definition of a site will be very similar to, if not identical to, the CALeVIP 1.0 definition, generally just a developed area. But we will post more detailed information on that because it can get quite complicated, but we will post more of that information along with implementation manual and other resources on our website once that information is ready.
Thank you. Brian, can a site be eligible for both Communities in Charge and CALeVIP 2.0 if they install both level 2 and DC fast chargers?
TBD. We are going to be discussing that with our partners at CALSTART and CSE to determine if we should do that and what the process would look like. But right now, we do not have a clear answer on that.
Thank you. And I have a couple of questions for Jeff at CALSTART. Will there be a similar presentation on Communities in Charge and any changes for level 2 funding?
Yes, and thank you for your question. We are planning a series of advisory work group meetings tentatively slated for the end of May as well as the middle part of June. Save the dates have gone out to a series of stakeholders as of last week. However, we've not secured a finalized date just yet. And we're working with our community engagement partners over at Grid Alternatives to engage more community stakeholders, and that will happen in the month of July. Again, on that, dates TBD.
Thank you, Jeff. And one more for you. Will level 2 charging application windows through Communities in Charge follow the same pattern and timeline as CALeVIP?
If the question is more having to do with alignment in that, for instance, when Project 1 opens for CALeVIP 2.0, will therefore a Project 1 open at the same date and time as Communities in Charge? That's something that's still to be determined. However, we are looking to roughly align timelines so that folks pursuing incentives towards either DC fast charging or for level 2 charging do have opportunities at or around the same time to pursue an application.
Thank you, Jeff. Fidel, is it possible that you receive enough Tier 1 applications that no funding would go to Tier 2 or Tier 3 applications?
Yes, it would be possible if there is enough applicants that are in that Tier 1 to satisfy the entire funding for the application window. It is possible that all the funding goes to Tier 1 applicants. And again, we would encourage applicants in Tier 2 and 3 that would not receive funding to continue preparing their projects for the next application window.
Thank you. Fidel, can you give priority to census tracts without any DCFCs or with high rental MUD concentrations?
Yes, so one of the region ideas was to prioritize regions without or with very few DC fast chargers and group them in one single funding to ensure that they receive their own installations. In terms of census tracts, I don't know that we would get to that granularity in our regions, but this is certainly an idea for our regions that we've received your feedback on and would welcome additional feedback on through your CEC docket comments.
Thank you. Another one for you, Fidel. Does CALeVIP have recommendations on installers?
No, we do not issue recommendations for installers or chargers. We remain brand agnostic in both technology and labor, but we do provide a resource called CALeVIP Connects, which is a form of a directory of installers, electricians, equipment manufacturers, network providers who are providing these services and facilitate you reaching out and connecting with the resources that you need. So if you're interested in that resource, that is currently up on calevip.org. So I would welcome you to visit that if you are interested.
Thank you. And just to give you a break, Fidel, Brian, how is CALeVIP considering regions or counties that haven't had CALeVIP funding available to them yet?
So we are considering that and trying to shape that into some of our funding region options as well, the concepts. But again, we are moving away from a county by county funding pot, and it would just be per the region. So we are considering that. And as well, when we have our concepts finalized and our regions finalized, that may also go into deciding, okay, you know, project one, window one has 30 million available, but these two regions have had lots of money from 1.0 and no money has gone to these other two regions. So that first window may say, well, let's concentrate on these other regions because a majority of these counties have not got funding. So again, it's not saying if we have 4 regions, every region's going to get $7.5 million, but we can consider, 1.0 distributions as part of our selection and funding analysis, but all of that's still TBD.
Thank you, Brian. Fidel, does this project allow the solar portion of the tech installed for chargers to count?
So standalone solar would not be an eligible cost at this point for CALeVIP 2.0. In CALeVIP 1.0, we did allow solar if it was an integrated solution with charging. For example, the Beam make-ready solution. However, given that there is no level 2 in CALeVIP 2.0, there is level 2 in CALSTART program, Community in Charge. That has been dropped for CALeVIP 2.0. But again, we would welcome your comments in the CEC docket on this topic.
Thank you. Brian, there are 2 questions here that are somewhat similar. Will applications on the DCFC waitlist from 1.0 be first in line for 2.0? And similarly, will existing applications from, let's say, Project 1, Window 1, automatically be considered for Window 2?
Sure. good questions. So the first one, will applications from 1.0 move over to 2.0? No. They're a different application process. It also has a first come, first serve in those lines. And so there still is a possibility for the 1.0 applications to get funded if others drop out. So we will not be shifting 1.0 applications to 2.0, as well as because the minimum requirements change and the application itself will be a completely different application. The second question, I just blinked. Oh, application. If you apply for application window 1 but don't get funded, what happens for application window 2? That's something we're still considering and welcome comments on. Again, as we're encouraging applicants that don't get funded to go and improve themselves to a new tier, we are contemplating ideas to maybe give them a little bonus that says, hey, this individual applied previously and they were in tier 1. They applied again and maybe now are in tier 2 or tier 3. Since it would still be randomized, we are contemplating some type of benefit to say, well, this person has made improvement and continues to try. And what, if anything, could we do? So under consideration, and we welcome comments on it, is what I would say.
Thank you, Brian. Fidel, can you expand on how the region concept of degree of urbanization works? Would you be prioritizing one category, for example, like most urban, over the other categories, or would you be focused on splitting the funding evenly between the 3 categories?
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. The intent is to group similar regions, similar communities together and treat them as one funding region and split funding up that way to ensure even and fair competition between different areas and to ensure that not all installations go into just one region. So funding would be split up by region, and that would be announced again when we have more finalized project details.
Thank you, Fidel. Brian, is the point of the program to disperse chargers around the state or to get equipment in the ground where it's needed the most?
Both. So it's multiple goals again, that we need to get chargers in the ground, but at the same time, we need to make sure that we're getting chargers in the ground that are meeting our state's goals of equity, our SB 1000 analysis that says we need to make sure we have good distribution for rural residents as well, and just meeting the need. So we need chargers in the ground quicker, which is why we are proposing these tier levels of readiness. But we also need to make sure that, like we previously said, not all chargers go to LA or San Francisco or etc. They need to be spread out. And so we need some type of control to make sure that that happens.
Thank you, Brian. Another one for you, Brian. When do you expect the DC fast charger models will be commercially available that are Energy Star certified? They do not appear to be any yet, according to EPA's list.
So if you've followed CALeVIP through our years, when CALeVIP 1.0 launched its first project, but even before we launched, we announced the requirement of Energy Star certification for level 2 chargers, while there were 0 Energy Star certified chargers. Today, that list has grown 20, 30 models or so. So while there are none today, the specification and testing method have been established and available for over a year. And so we have heard that some manufacturers are in the process to either make their hardware adjustments or are in active testing. But now, nothing, the run to the finish line happens after requirements are announced. So again, we wanted to fully come out and say that this is a requirement and give a date. As again, in 2019, we workshopped it and said we will want this as a requirement once it's been established. And so we're hoping that the manufacturers now have been doing some work and they have a little over a year to finish the process before the requirement is in effect.
Thank you, Brian. Fidel, are funds available for tribal entities?
Yes, any location within the regions would be eligible for funding. Obviously, it depends on the site types, which is still being finalized, but would largely follow CALeVIP 1.0. There is no specific region or money that would be set aside initially for tribal. I mean, this could be something that we focus on once we are focusing on specific gaps in DCFC charging with our more targeted programs. But for Project 1.0 and 2.0 within CALeVIP 2.0, sorry, Project 1 and 2 within CALeVIP 2.0, there wouldn't be a specific incentive for tribal communities.
And I'll just add also that our 2.0 projects will be utilizing CalEnviroScreen 4.0 as it has been finalized and ready to go now after some testing. And tribal lands have been added as defined as DAC. And so our first project, again, being proposed as DAC, LIC only, tribal lands would also be eligible for this first project.
Yes, thank you for that clarification, Brian.
Brian, I only see $132,000 left in my county. Will this increase with CALeVIP 2.0?
So again, previous projects from 1.0 are going to be completely separate from 2.0. So we cannot shift funds from any projects previously launched into our new project because they are separate grant agreements with the Center for Sustainable Energy. So the funding there still needs to be utilized, and we will be exploring ways to try to do some additional marketing to get those funds applied for. But no, they will not be moved to 2.0.
Thank you, Brian. Fidel, do all installers need to be EVITP certified?
Yes, so this is actually a law that any state funding through the agencies, being the California Energy Commission, the Air Resources Board, and the Public Utilities Commission, installations using their funding must use EVITP certified installers and follow those requirements, being that for installations with chargers less than 25 kilowatts, you must have at least one EVITP certified electrician and the installation crew at all times. For this project, the more relevant one will be the above 25 kilowatt requirement, which means that 25% of the installers, certified electricians, must be EVITP certified as well when installing charging stations. And we do have resources on the CALeVIP page within each within each landing page discussing these specific regulations, both from the state and from the various agencies to help guide you through them and hopefully make this easier. So I encourage you to visit that and find more information there if you have more questions.
Thank you. Another one for you, Fidel. Will there be the same 5-year networking agreement, and does it need to be prepaid?
Yeah, so there needs to be a networking agreement in place. We need to receive the 5 years of data for each installation. In terms of it being prepaid, I'm assuming this means all 5 years need to be paid at the time of application. I don't believe we would require payment for all 5 years. We would require evidence of an agreement in place and require that 5 years of data be submitted through the networking provider.
Thank you. Brian, can you clarify the different project names? I've seen Communities in Charge, CALeVIP 1.0, 2.0, Project 1, 2, 3.
Sure. So CALeVIP is going to be the umbrella name for 1.0 and 2.0. CALeVIP 1.0 is one individual agreement to launch projects up to $200 million. So those were CALeVIP projects 1 through 13, the last one being the Southern California Level 2 project. 2.0 now is still going to be under that CALeVIP umbrella, but will now be projects, beyond the 1 through 13. Communities in Charge is a separate grant agreement as well with CALSTART and the Energy Commission to implement new projects for level 2 chargers. So that will be its own separate project block grant with its own website as well, separate from the CALeVIP website.
Thank you. Fidel, will you have a published extension policy soon?
We do have a published extension policy located within each program's landing page. So you can certainly go and visit that. Any updates would also be posted there, and extension policy for 2.0 is still in development. So if you have any comments on that, feel free to include them in your comments to the CEC docket.
Thank you. And this one is for Jeff from CALSTART. How can organizations get involved in the advisory group meetings for Communities in Charge?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The best way to become involved with any of the advisory group meetings, which are planning to be held over the next couple of months, would be to reach out to myself or Dylan at the email addresses provided earlier in the presentation, and we can coordinate with you individually to ensure that you receive a save the date or an invite once the dates for those respective advisory work groups are finalized.
Thank you. All right, it looks like we are near the end of the list of questions. There are a couple of questions about what is a landing page, and I can help answer that. So on calevip.org, you'll see our main website. And if you click on Find a Project, you'll be able to see all of the different landing pages for each CALeVIP 1.0 project. And we will likely have a different link for the 2.0 projects. So keep an eye out for that. It'll be available. It'll be linked through the main website. And there's also a question about how to be informed about these workshops in a timely manner. So I would say the best way is to join the CALeVIP subscriber list, and you'll receive emails about upcoming webinars and workshops, and as well as notifications when projects are launched.
And then to double protect yourself, so there's two kind of CALeVIP listservs. There's the one that you can sign up for on calevip.org, and that will come directly from CSE and the CALeVIP team anytime there's an announcement. As well, you can sign up at the Energy Commission on the listserv coming from us. There is a listserv solely for CALeVIP announcements. This would be for 1.0 and 2.0, but you would just double protect yourself.
Thank you, Brian. All right, well, that will wrap up our Q&A session. I really appreciate all of the feedback we've received today and a lot of great questions. And thank you, panelists, for your answers. And just as a reminder, the workshop will be sent out to all attendees by the 16th. And it is also, the slideshow is posted on the CEC docket linked here. Another note is that we will have new dockets for CALeVIP 2.0 and Communities in Charge, and those will be available shortly. I'd like to thank everyone for joining today. I think this was a really productive workshop, so appreciate all your feedback, and please do not hesitate to post comments or to send us emails if you have questions. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.